All right, Davis, welcome to the pod. I believe I've had you on my pod before. I've definitely done your pod a few times, the Take Cast. What else you got going on over there? Because normally you have like too many companies and names for me to remember for all the different pots that you're stirring over there. So tell me, why don't you pitch a little bit here? What's going on with you before we get into all the different subject matter in this a little bit of a slow time in the NFL season?
A little bit of a slow time. So we got we have the Take Cast, which is there's some football. We talk football, but not fantasy. Then we have the Sports Grid Fantasy Football Podcast, and then I do TV 6 days a week on Sports Grid. So if you're in an airport, if you're in a bar, they probably have my channel on. Actually, if you have a smart TV, we're on. Our company's business model is free ad-supported television. It's kind of this new thing that companies are pivoting to. So if you have a smart TV, you can watch Sports Grid whenever you want. It's a lot. It's all, it's mostly betting. We do fantasy stuff on the weekends, but those are all the places you can keep up with me.
I wasn't even that familiar with the Sports Grid stuff. So this is something where, so you're saying this is not like through your traditional like YouTube TV now, I guess would be the new traditional thing, or cable package provider, but this is something that people can stream through smart TVs, basically.
Yes. So I believe, again, I'm about 19 rungs down the corporate ladder here. But I do believe, actually, I know, because like when I go to like my in-laws house, I can be like, hey, we can put on my channel. It's like in the 600s, it's way down there. But the
are you building cred? Are you building cred with this being
everyone? It's funny. Every once in a while, someone will text my wife. And they'll be like, I was at the airport or I was at the gym or whatever, and I just saw your husband on TV, which builds a little bit of cred. But I believe it's one of these things that comes included in some satellite packages. Yeah, but the basic business model for the TV stuff is free ad-supported television.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. So you're doing all that stuff here. Maybe just for anyone who's listening here, who's not kind of familiar with your arc here, would you say that you were, I don't know, I guess my familiarity with you going back, which seems like a lifetime ago, but we're talking, even if we go back 5, 6, 7 years in the fantasy football space, that was kind of more of the argument being more on the side of, the numbers-ish type of analysis versus team small wide receiver. We were team big wide receiver, of course, going against those guys all the time.
We were, but then the NFL changed up on us. Kevin, we were so right. And then the NFL changed rules and the short passing offense and the cover two really undid us.
I think so. I mean, but to be honest, when you have, your AJ Browns and your DK Metcalfs and your Deebo Samuels, like your bigger wide receiver types going in the second round and then becoming huge smashes, it was kind of weird in some ways that people have fallen off on it. Well, we'll see if Treylon Burks and others end up hitting similarly way, but it's weird how the NFL doesn't value those guys nearly as much. But that was kind of like the argument back in the day between those things. And then moving further and further, obviously DFS being a huge thing and that being your main focus. And now, what would you consider the evolution after that?
DFS is still my favorite thing of all. Actually, not even true. Season-long fantasy football is my favorite thing. The issue with that is,
doing waiver wire.
I love it. I do.
Really? Oh my God. I remember there was one year I went all in on fantasy football. It was 2015. I know the season well because I had Andy Dalton and Tyler Eifert on like all my different teams, and they were crushing until they both got injured at the end of the season, and then everything went to shit. But doing waivers, because I was doing them for a bunch of high stakes teams at the same time, was just like soul crushing, because I'm the type of person, maybe if I'm doing it with someone else, it'd be better, but I'm the type of person where I'll have like an epiphany 5 different times during the evening of how I need to change around my bids, and then I'll go and I'll rechange them, and it just became like a soul-crushing exercise every single week.
Yes. So all my high-stakes teams are co-managed. I do some by myself, but which is kind of nice. It's kind of a communal thing, which is sort of nice. But I love best ball. I love DFS. But the thing is, in our space, the corner of the internet where I've been employed, the number one thing people care about right now is sports betting. And the issue with that is it's hard to do good sports betting content for me because I can give out plays, I can give out hunches. I can play and be like, oh, I like this golf bet. I like this bet in baseball tonight. I think this Nikola Jokic line is a little bit too long, or 5% off. But people don't really care about that. They just want winners. They don't want to learn how to sports bet. They don't want to learn that, just even the idea that it's really more of a mathematical exercise than an exercise about knowing about sports. People kind of bristle at that. So a lot of the sports betting content is that's what people want. That's where the clicks go, all that stuff. But it's especially as someone who I don't do Python, I don't do R, I don't code, I don't build models. It's harder for me to do what I think is like really, really good sports betting content.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think there's just less incentive, even for someone who's betting, to care about being good at betting when you can just blindly fire off and then you lose the juice, you lose the vig, and then you just move on with your life and have the entertainment from it, as opposed to if you're bad at DFS, you're just going to get crushed. And it's going to be very, very obvious that you're going to get crushed. And there's not going to be much entertainment value in it at all when you're just losing all of your money. And it's complicated. And it's like a lot of work too. So all those different things combined, like there's more value in having good content there, because then you can actually apply it in this type of manner. Now, I guess I'm interested in sports betting for the fact that I'm interested in larger questions about whether teams are good or not. And, it kind of fits in with maybe analytical thinking about football that goes beyond, fantasy football, beyond projecting the skill positions. At the same time, like, markets are pretty good. I think the value in doing this type of analytical football work for me is more pushing back against awful media narratives and recency bias and things like that. And if the betting markets reflected the kind of general dummy consensus, I'll call it, of the way people look at sports, then I think it would be a great area for great content. But the markets most of the time don't reflect and are much more closer or exactly matching my own opinion. And then it's like, how do you make content there against smart betting markets? I can make content against dumber media markets.
So I think the thing is that exactly what you said, which is true, which is that doing smart content for like MVP markets or futures markets, where sure, the hold is going to be pretty high, so it's harder to fire really good bets in there, but those are going to be markets that are more dumbed down, right? Where normie consensus is making the Cowboys, 14-1 to win the Super Bowl, when, like, I don't know, their real numbers maybe like 30 or 35 to 1.
Well, the books are just going to price it with enough hold that they don't really care. They're kind of like, well, we'll price in enough overall hold in this and this sort of thing that even if we're wrong about some of this stuff, we'll probably end up being okay.
Sure. And I mean, like, just for my own purposes, like, I've done way better, not even close, betting larger picture stuff, futures, MVPs, golf outrights, things like that. Whereas anytime I've really tried to dial down, betting player props and head-to-head matchups in golf and things like that, it's either gotten not fun really fast just via the amount of work you need to put in, or I've lost like 3 days in a row and just completely lost the patience to do it. The times where the times that have been most fun for me doing the more micro betting though are large international soccer tournaments, so European Championships, the World Cup, where the lines are a little bit softer because more people are betting into them. They're available earlier. Normally if I we're talking Tuesday, June 6th. The Champions League final is on Saturday, and there's no individual player props posted for that yet, at least at the books that I have access to. Whereas for the World Cup, they were posting stuff like weeks early.
Yeah, well, I know, and even when it comes to props, I'll be interested to see the evolution of like Establish the Run and what they're doing with their props, because they release something. I guess it's in their Discord. Is that where we're releasing something? And I know from people who bet this stuff that they just completely like level out the market immediately when they put something out there, and everything moves based upon what they're doing. And I don't know, like, it'll be interesting. Even the value proposition for their subscribers, like, is all the juice, is it all going to be squeezed out, basically, the value that you even get there, for the fact that once you move the market with your own recommendations and the markets are small enough, and then they start moving, like, what's even left for subscribers there? It just seems like a very hard problem to solve, basically.
It is a hard problem to solve. I mean, I got it. So the ETR guys, you know, they do their football props and they do their basketball props, and like, they're moving markets, and even in moving those markets, they're crushing them. And I honestly, like, I have never subscribed to a service that gives sports betting picks, but I've got plenty of buddies who are into stuff like that. They don't do this for a living. They're just hanging out in Discord all day. Like, they want some winning picks. And I actually think most people's experience with really reputable companies like that are like, look, this is what you have to do to get down, it's largely good, right? Even if let's say you miss 1 out of 3 plays because they give out, I don't know, Duncan Robinson over 2.5 3-pointers made or whatever. And then by the time you're on Discord, you see the alert, you open your app, and then it's gone or whatever, which I think is like a relatively common experience. But there is still 100% edges to be found in betting on sports. The larger issue in the United States right now is that if you are a winning player, they're going to limit your amount of money that you can win, right? So maybe you're the greatest golf head-to-head bettor in world history, and no matter what DraftKings and FanDuel and BetMGM do to their golf model to price head-to-heads, you're crushing them. You're getting over on them at like 58, 59% or whatever. They can just be like, sorry, you can't bet. This market is not available to you, or you can get down 3 cents,
Yeah.
Very immoral, honestly, to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree, although I don't know. It would be interesting to see, like, what would happen. Well, there are some books, right, that aren't as bad at doing that. But then
our friends over at Circus Sports, their whole deal, Jeff Benson, their whole deal is they just want to write as many tickets as possible and give the biggest thing that they do is they offer no on their markets, which keeps the hold. So it's like Rory McIlroy to win the RBC Canadian Open, or him not to win the RBC Canadian Open.
Yeah. I just know that, like, once you become a successful enough sports bettor, a lot of these guys are spending almost as much time getting, outs or getting different accounts that they can bet through, basically. And have some sort of profit sharing.
Getting beards, and honestly, I've heard, it's not that uncommon that people honestly hate legalization, and they wish that it was more, getting 5 dimes to send you Amazon gift cards or whatever to pay out, because like people miss that. I mean, I think there's like an element of like people, miss kind of the wild west nature of it. And now that, everyone, has a sportsbook account, it's a little bit different, but certainly there is no push from the legislative side in the United States to make things more fair for winning players. Like, that's just not happening.
Yeah. Now, do you have any, this is something that I don't really know, is you see numbers that are out there like, oh, there was so much of handle in this state or that state, and how much that they're taking in, and they're growing their betting operations. To me, it still seems like a fringe thing. I mean, I don't know how big culturally it really is, or people are actually betting on it, or how much it's really changed from maybe people who were doing it in some sort of black market function, who are now doing it in a legalized way, but not necessarily for huge money. I guess contrasting that with the huge investment. I mean, you talked about not only in content, but in advertising, everything else that's gone into it. I don't know. What do you think about the betting market generally? I guess I'm just a little skeptical that it'll ever fulfill maybe what people are hoping that its potential will be.
I mean, I think we're certainly running into the issue right now that we did in DFS, where it seems very prevalent to us because we're in it and we see the commercials on TV or everything. But certainly, I think the total addressable market of sports betting in the United States is pretty close to being met in terms of like everyone who's going to have a sports betting account probably already has one, or is pretty it's pretty close. Let's call it 80-85% saturated or something like that. So what we're seeing is these big entities are just competing against each other to knock the other one out, right? There used to be a billion DFS companies. You used to be able to play DFS on like 15 different sites, and now there's basically 2. I don't know, there's probably some other fringe ones that people play on. And that, that's what's going to happen is there's going to be losers out of BetMGM and Caesars and Fox Sports Bet, which I think maybe already folded actually. And like all these, there are going to be losers. There are going to be companies that look at their profit and loss and be like, you know what, let's just sell our remaining infrastructure to company X and just wash our hands of this.
When do you think that we get to the point in the cycle where the promotional money and the affiliate money kind of dries up in that sort of like loss leading way that, I mean, we saw in DFS also, combined with these like controversies that they had in DFS, which are kind of an overblown sort of thing, I think also helped pop some of the, I don't know if it's a bubble in DFS, but definitely a leveling off in activity there. Do you see that in the near future?
I mean, I think we're probably already there.
Okay.
I don't live in a legal sports betting state, but I go to legal sports betting states, fairly. Like, Illinois is 10, 15 minutes away, so I can go over there. And the offers and the free bets and all that stuff are smaller than ever. When they open in a new state, it used to be $1,000 free bets when a new state is there, and now it's like $250 free bets or $100 free bet. So the faucet of like consistent promotional offers and ways to basically milk free money out of these new sites is already dwindling, to my understanding.
Yeah. Well, I'll be interested to see how this all plays out. I guess I'm a little bit skeptical in what'll end up happening, but we'll end up seeing. All right, so let's hit some topical stuff here. I'm going to break my vow to never talk golf, but we will have to talk about how the announced merger here between PGA and LIV Golf. So to talk about this stuff, yeah, I don't know anything. I mean, I know very little. I know what I see on Twitter. I see people that are, upset about it in some ways. Everyone has their Succession memes, which another show that I don't watch, so I don't get. I
haven't watched Succession either. I've been trying to like soft sell my wife
memes as related to PGA diehards who did not come over to LIV and get that bag and are now having the rug pulled out from under them, sort of situation. Give me the proper take on this, because I guess we're going to hear a lot of this. Everything's a hypocrisy. Everything is this and that. And well, that's probably true. It's okay to be cynical when it's deserved to be so. But I tend to always lean against, at least a little bit, what the consensus opinion is. So am I wrong to be doing that? What's your take on this whole merger?
I mean, the primary issue is that many people believe anything from the United States is good and that anything from Middle Eastern countries is bad. Now, Saudi Arabia is bad. For me, the private investment fund is a bad thing that's ruining stuff that I like: golf, soccer, other professional sports. It's
and when you say ruining, like what's the context for ruining? Essentially, like not like causing an imbalance. Essentially,
yeah, it's just making it not fun. You pretty much know, what do we like about sports? We like an uncertainty of outcome. We like drama, and there's none of that, right? We know the teams that are going to win the Champions League every year. We know the teams that are going to win the Premier League every year, and that is not fun. Now in golf, it's a little bit different, right? Because golf is a more variant game, and it's not like no one really cares, I think, who owns the PGA Tour at the end of the day.
You're not able to build a team.
You're not able to build. Right. You're not able to build a team.
It comes into the team dynamic of it, where you can put the best players all on the same team. That's the problem when it comes to these competitive dynamics. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You hit it. You hit it 100%. So, but the issue obviously is everyone is like, anti Saudi Arabia. I mean, like Raytheon and Boeing are PGA Tour sponsors. Who do you think sells weapons to the Saudis? It's like, I guess, honestly, I'm probably not the person you want to have on this, because I'm so uber cynical. I'm so anti-capitalist that for me, what's the fundamental difference between a tour sponsored by Raytheon and Boeing and the Saudi Arabian private investment fund? My take on the whole thing is, like, obviously I don't like philosophically a lot of the things the Saudis do, but more importantly than that, I just want good golf. And this is going to be a return to the best possible golf. But there are a lot of guys who are going to have to walk things back. Basically Rory and Scheffler and Rahm, the five, basically let's call it the 10 best golfers in the world, basically took a moral stance. Basically we're like, we could make $100 million more per year guaranteed if we take this money and we can go and do this. But for moral reasons and for, Rahm was more like, I like the history of the PGA Tour and I'm a student of the game. Like he kind of took that angle. But realistically, they were all kind of taking a moral stance because they could have made beyond generational wealth. Like they could have been billionaires by playing on the LIV Tour, basically, and they're not. And now everyone, whether they took a moral stance or not, is going to have to walk that back because I forget his name, but the guy who is the head of the private investment fund of Saudi Arabia is now going to be the commissioner of the PGA Tour. So it's like and Jay Monahan said all this stuff, and guys were invoking the name of Khashoggi and pointing out all these atrocities, and that's your boss now. And so, but the other thing is, you're a professional golfer. You spent your whole life playing professional golf, but let's say you do want to take a moral stance. Where do you go? There's nowhere left to go. There's no professional tour on earth that you could make enough money that is not sponsored by the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund. So that does seem like a little bit of an issue. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the moral stance thing, I think it can be genuine from a player level. From the PGA Tour level, I was much more incredulous of that sort of stuff. It seemed like more of a
the PGA Tour is some bastion of morality and light in the world. Like I never bought that. Like
it's like the CIA celebrating diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
Whatever.
It's like you got to remember who you are.
But I think it was more like who's going to win, right? So who's going to win eventually if there was going to be a winner here. And the PGA Tour lost. Basically too many players were willing to take the check that it made it difficult to say we have leverage against them in any way to restrict them from playing in wherever, especially when the majors are not part of this whole thing, right? Like that makes it an impossibility. So
really big thing is that the thing that most people who watch golf care about are less tangled up in this than you would think.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not enough leverage for non-major tournaments to have ever been able to win this, probably. Now, what do you think this does for someone like Phil Mickelson, who obviously caught a lot of hell?
He gets to tell everyone to eat shit. He won, right? I mean, that is.
I'm actually surprised. I was shocked that he had so much of a problem with his comments. And again, maybe I'm just being way, way too cynical, where he basically said, I don't even remember. You have to correct me on this, but it was kind of like talking about the Khashoggi stuff and all this other stuff. He was like, whatever, we all do some bad stuff. Kind of was his situation. Like he was.
Well, people don't want to know this. What people really hate to understand about modern life is that you can do whatever fucked up amoralistic thing you want to do if you have enough money. And I think inherently people do not like to admit that. And what I think people find so distasteful about the Saudis versus large American corporations like Amazon, like Google, like whatever, is that in Western countries, I think we maintain a facade of charity, of do-goodingness, of wanting to further the human race, whatever it may be. And I think what people bristle at so much with foreign money is that facade doesn't apply. And they just really rub your noses in the black and white fact of that in capitalist economies, the most money is always going to win. That's really, we don't know. I mean, we're talking about 2 hours after all this broke, so we'll see what ends up coming out. My guess is that this is what happened. The PGA Tour ran the numbers, realized they way overcommitted themselves. They upped all this prize money. They created these exclusive events. They promised, revenue sharing and all this money with the players. And they basically we're going to run out of money. Anything bad happens to the housing market with a bunch of our sponsors, whatever, like we are so screwed and we're not going to be able to pay these people. Because the other crazy thing about this whole deal is no one knew. I mean, we've had, rumors and reporting and stuff leaking out about everything going on with the LIV Tour since the idea existed. And there was nothing on this. It was a complete surprise, which is wild.
It is wild, although I just think that the fact that there was this, I don't know how long of a period it was. It was all within, it seemed like it was all within a couple of weeks. Maybe it was more like a couple of months, where so many major golfers did take the check and move over, despite like the Mickelson being the huge pushback there and him essentially having to go into hiding, go on a hiatus, a forced hiatus for a while, that it almost seemed like dead man walking at that point. There was already a critical enough mass. And then you have people like Brooks is, still winning majors and doing other things after it just became an impossibility, I think, at that point.
You're saying what became an impossibility?
To be able to hold off, at that point. There's already too many golfers too many big name golfers who had moved over, I think.
So, I mean, I get it comes back to the majors thing, right?
Yeah.
Because the majors were always going to have those guys, and the elevated events that they did, it definitely did help. As someone who watches more golf tournaments than just the majors, like having the 10 best guys on the PGA Tour like locked into these 6 or 7 events a year was nice. But I think you're right. I think it's like a sustainability thing, because if any other dominoes continue to fall, like if Scotty Scheffler or Jordan Spieth or whatever, if they were like, peace out, we're taking the money, each of those corresponding things made it more difficult for the PGA Tour. And the PGA Tour probably needed an economic redesign at some point anyway. So this was sort of, I think, an impetus for that.
Yeah. And I think maybe some of the context missing, the larger context missing when it comes to Saudi Arabia is there's like this intense focus on the continuing civil rights issues in Saudi Arabia. Obviously, we had a journalist who was killed, and it's been linked to now the crown prince. But at the same time, it's kind of not like your father's Saudi Arabia or whatever. It's not like your old school Saudi Arabia. I mean, the crown prince here, Mohammed bin Salman Al Saud, MBS is what they call him. I mean, he does have this plan of essentially transforming the country over the next, what was 15 years, starting in 2015 over to 2030, of becoming more about tourism, becoming more about industry, becoming more open in society. There was, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, he essentially brought in a whole bunch of people who've been living off of the largesse of the society, whether royal people in the royal family or not, stripped them of all their assets, kind of crack down on them who would have been impediments to these types of reforms. And, even socially and what's going on, it's essentially become, women have a lot more rights than they used to. I mean, they can drive a car now, which was something that was famously illegal before. A little bit less restrictions on attire, less restrictions on chaperoning and other sort of things that had to go on in society. And it's become, I think they're basically taking like the China model when it comes to these things, is we're going to open up economically. We're going to say what goes on inside the household and kind of these religious overtones to these sorts of things, we're going to back off from quite a bit. But then we're going to have a highly controlled state society on all of these ways that beyond the surface, like they don't have religious police out there anymore like they used to be. We're just open in the public, but beyond the surface, it's highly controlled. And I think they just look at like, I think another 10 years from now, the difference between Saudi Arabia in people's minds for these kinds of civil rights issues and other issues is not going to really be any different than China. And obviously,
yeah, but we don't really like China. I mean, China,
I know, but
we don't like China, and they're murdering
there's not
their
any
Muslim
real
population.
Beyond Republican politicians, there's not any real pushback.
And Republican politicians don't even really care. It's just a good. It's just a good. It's a good
regardless.
Bit.
Beyond Daryl Morey and Republican politicians. Okay, this I was actually shocked that Morey got another job after that. But Daryl Morey and Republican politicians, Like there's no real pushback to any sort of investment in China, right? And I think it's just going to be the same thing for Saudi Arabia now. And I'm not sure if people fully appreciate
I
that.
don't think you're making the argument you think you're making. I think you're making an argument about a more lax political attitude, but I think you're actually making the same argument I'm making, which is people will forgive anything for money. You can buy what
you have to have the superficiality of openness, though, and I think okay,
sure,
it's not okay. Everything you can put in this kind of binary, and I agree. At enough money, anything will be accepted. The thing is, you can make these reforms where you can have like it's like the reforms in China, where you essentially have a highly controlled society, but when you're walking down the street, you're doing other things, you don't feel it. Okay. You don't feel it like you would have in the past. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. If you're in Saudi Arabia in the past, the women are covered. Like, again, you have these religious police on on these street corners, this and that. Now you start to be able to walk through society and you don't see it. So while it's still there, it's not superficially, it's changed. And that's what allows people to get over the hump when it comes to now we're really talking about dollars and cents here.
Yeah. It's all optics though.
Yes.
Right. I mean, we're talking battle of optics. Like,
but optics matter. Optics matter.
Sure,
If you're going to go work in some place and you're going to be, a Western executive or something like that, like it's going to matter whether you can go you can go to your home and you can say, hey, I can't go on the internet and talk shit on the other crowd Brits or whatever, but I can basically live my life and it feels in a way like it doesn't feel like a closed society in that sort of way. And then, the money will flow in after that. I mean, obviously in soccer, we're seeing it here where I think eventually, I think they're going to be in the Champions League or something like that. Eventually,
that is what is going to happen is they are going to configure the current UEFA Champions League to include Asian teams, to include Qatari and Saudi Arabian teams.
Especially Saudi Arabia. I mean, I think maybe we'll go further in Asia, but you need to have well established. I mean, we talk about here, obviously Ronaldo's already there. Who knows? He's making hundreds of millions of dollars.
He's leaving. So Ron had a terrible time, but Messi is going apparently. That's
maybe.
rumored.
Messi's trying to decide like whether he wants to have one last shot at a legitimate like elite player in Europe before taking the check.
Benzema,
he'll go eventually. Messi's going eventually. If not
Karim
this year,
Benzema,
next
who
year.
won the Ballon d'Or 12 months ago, less than that even, is in Saudi Arabia now.
He's low-key washed, though. What do you think about that? What do you think about that take?
I mean, he played the second half of the year injured. I mean, maybe he is like up there. So I'm not going to say he's not.
Yeah.
But he could go to the Premier League and be one of the 5 best forwards for sure, I think.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I do. Well, whatever. He's taking the check. I think when players take the check, I do think it says something about their opinion on their own. Well, first of all, he played for the team that won the Champions League like a ridiculous amount of times recently also. So it doesn't really like the incentive is maybe not as high to say that I want to stay and win another Champions League title when realistically, like, it's a difficult proposition for any team to win. But I think that's part of it is like, am I washed enough? Basically, like, do I have plus Benzema's one of these guys where you read about him a little bit, he has this whole crew that he's still somewhat shady crew that he's like been still hanging out with from where he grew up outside of Leon and other stuff. Like, I think he values money a lot too. So taking the check for him makes some sense too, but that's going to continue, right? They're going to continue to recruit these players.
Well, we haven't even touched on the big thing that this leads to, which is that eventually the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund buying NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball teams, this is the first. I would say that's less than 3 years away before we start to see that. Do you think
so? I don't know. It's not a very international game though. Like, how do you get?
Because you need American Western people to think highly, to think more promisingly of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's why they're doing all of this. That's why they want to win the Champions League. That it's all a part of it.
I just feel like you get so much more leverage out of soccer when it comes to all these other countries that don't give a damn. I mean, NFL, I feel like is pretty safe because like no one gives a damn about the NFL outside of the United States. Basketball, maybe, although China has made pretty good progress already as far as building up basketball there, and even then, they have very little success in recruiting players that anyone would actually care about beyond these kind of friendly tours during the off season. So it's possible. It's possible. I just feel like they'd probably be smarter just to continue to lean into soccer right now that they have a little bit of a toehold in moving up in that area. But I guess it's just my bigger point is that this is part of a huge push for them to diversify the entire economy away from being this rentier sort of oil-based economy to getting into all these other different areas, and it's probably just gonna continue in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably right. One issue that's happening there though is like they're kind of running out of teams to buy because they already own Manchester City, they already own PSG. I don't think Barcelona or Real Madrid.
Well, now you're saying they in like the broader sense. I mean, Saudi Arabia. It's not Saudi Arabia necessarily that owns these.
To me, I'm viewing this.
They actually have a bit of a different strategy, trying to establish their own soccer league as opposed to just buying into other.
Well, they've got both, right? Saudi Arabia and Qatar, are doing, and yes, obviously there are differences between Qatar and Saudi Arabia, but to me, they're $1 trillion Muslim fundamentalist countries. So I'm an ignorant American. I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to like go. The aims are the same. The source of the wealth is the same. Natural resources.
Right. I'm just saying
these
Saudi
countries.
Arabia has
these are like the luckiest countries on earth.
Saudi Arabia has more of a let's try and build something which will end up being sustainable, as opposed to, buying PSG is not like building something that's sustainable. It's just a money-losing venture that they're willing to have in order just for PR purposes to cover up like their existing economy. I'm saying Saudi Arabia, as much as what they're doing, that's why I'm saying it is different. They're trying to do something different with this and actually building up a league as opposed to just throwing money at something for PR. That's the vision.
Is it the vision though? Because I think the end is the
Vision
same.
2030. I don't know. That's what they call it, but yeah.
I think the end goal is the same, which is we want Western people with disposable income and nuclear weapons to have a higher opinion of us, right? That really is the goal. Is to have the people who control the balance of power in the world think more highly of them.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll see. I mean, again, that's not what their stated goal is. They are trying to build up all these different industries in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but don't be naive though. You don't create Vision 2030 out of the goodness of your heart. I don't think.
No, it's not about the goodness of their hearts. No, nothing's about the goodness of their hearts. It is a recognition of, number one, oil reserves there are probably a lot less than what the estimates have, and number two, I don't think we've hit a tipping point on oil usage, but I do think we're going to see either an acceleration of electric versus oil use in these different things, or if you want to say a decay of oil usage, that's going to be pretty strong in the next few decades. And you want to be out in front of that for these countries, as opposed to being fully dependent upon that. They could go very quickly from being, largesse type of economies to having a natural resource when it goes down enough where you're talking about scraping by profitability wise and could shift everything there. I think that's what they're thinking, at least, is they want to build up and diversify the economy there, where I'm not sure Qatar and others are actually doing that. All right, let's shift gears here. We've done enough back and forth here on this. Let's shift gears to NFL stuff. Do we care about anything that's going on now? I don't know. OTA,
like practice stuff. Yeah. I honestly cannot get enough of Bryce Young looking like a child who wandered out in the middle of Panthers camp.
I haven't seen any Bryce Young stuff yet. Is that what he looks like? I don't even know.
And also just the 49ers quarterback palace intrigue. Like that is my favorite storyline in the NFL is how much Kyle Shanahan hates Trey Lance, but then knowing that this other shoe might drop of who told me this story? Was it you who told me this story? No, it wasn't. It was Eric Eager. He told me this story of basically what happened. You probably know this, which is that Fran Tarkenton worked with Brock Purdy before the draft and basically taught him the Shanahan West Coast offense, everything, right? The verbiage, the audibles, the exact throws you need to make, like all this stuff, so that when Purdy met with Shanahan and then got to practice, Shanahan was like blown away. Like basically gave him the answers to the test before Shanahan.
That's why they took them with the last pick of the 7th round in the NFL draft.
Well, Brock Purdy stinks, right? I mean, Brock Purdy is not good, right? That basically that's what Tarkenton said to Purdy. This is per Eric. Because basically like, dude, you suck, but I can get you drafted. I can get you on an NFL roster. And so I'm also kind of waiting for this realization of Shanahan that his fundamental problem that led to him drafting Trey Lance in the first place, which is that he keeps bringing a knife to a gunfight at the quarterback position, is still fundamentally true. And because the other interesting thing is for every year for like the last 4 years, the 49ers have been like top 5 favorites in the market to win the Super Bowl, despite no one ever actually thinking that they can win the Super Bowl. So I find that fascinating. It's a fascinating situation.
No, I do agree. It's fascinating. I do agree that when it comes to like Super Bowl odds, the fact that, I'm checking to see whether or not it's still the case. I know when I was looking at it earlier this year, it was basically the case that they were marginally worse than the Eagles. Yeah, it's a little bit. Well, let's go to conference winner on here. I'm just looking at DraftKings real fast. So Eagles plus 250, 49ers second plus 425. Okay, so it's spread out a little bit here. And we don't even know who their quarterback is going to be.
Could be anyone. Could be
the
Brandon
NFC
Allen.
Stinks. The NFC stinks. But I'm high key. Sam, can I get Sam Darnold overs? Because I feel like he looks good. Just throwing the ball. I mean, he was probably should have been the number 1 pick in the 2018 draft if it wasn't for the fact that, Dorsey, was really into Baker Mayfield. Like, I think if you have more than half the teams in the NFL would have taken Sam Darnold number 1 and not Baker Mayfield in that draft. He looks like someone who can maybe execute some of that quick game sort of throws. I mean, Darnold's problem is he tries to throw it down the field. He doesn't have a strong enough arm really to throw it down the field. And then he ends up getting himself in trouble trying to make like Josh Allen throws that he just can't make. But I don't know. I could see him going in there and looking pretty good. And again, your thing with Purdy, I agree with. There's nothing special about him. And we know that Trey Lance is dead. Like, he's going to be traded probably before the season ends up starting if they can find some place to offload him.
That's the thing. He's got a hard contract to trade because he was the 3rd overall pick. He's like a pretty significant amount of dead cap.
Yeah, I mean, the dead cap doesn't matter as much as teams being willing to take on the salary. What's his salary for the next 2 years?
His cap hit is 9.3, but his dead cap is 20 million.
Well, again, like the dead cap doesn't really matter, right? Like, you're only writing off, like, it's just cash, right? You've already paid the bonus. You've already paid the bonus. So if you're going to say it's a post June 1st trade, you save 3.7 million on the cap. Like, who cares? It's just the team that picks him up is going to have to be willing to guarantee. He has a guaranteed 5.3 million next year and a guaranteed 3.7 this year. That doesn't seem like a lot, but that's probably a high enough bump for a team that might just want to cut him after seeing him and being like, this guy's not it. So they probably can't quite hook someone on that. But at the same time, are they going to roll with him as their QB3 and then he's really completely worthless next season? So I don't know. I think Sam Darnold, I think he might take more snaps at quarterback than anyone else this season for the 49ers. I'd be interested to see if that happens.
I mean, if Purdy's 100% healthy, I don't think so, but I do believe more and more every day that they might just go with Darnold instead of Lance, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Darnold, Darnold can do the West Coast offense thing. You know, he can complete some checkdowns and move around in the pocket a little bit. It's just when he actually has the same problem Jimmy has, which is that when he gets out of structure, he just makes the dumbest, like he'll throw 5 absolutely backbreaking interceptions per season, more.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah. That was his problem most of his career. Last season, when he took over, he looked like he did his normal Sam Darnold thing where he looked really good for a while, and then he just started throwing picks left and right in that situation. Okay, so that's an interesting storyline with the 49ers. Is there any way to play this, I guess, here? Because I've been looking for their defense to fall off for like 5 years now. Because that's the thing that annoys me more than anything else is it's really like a defense-led team, honestly. For even though Shanahan has gotten a lot of the hype, and that's kind of where they're being credited here. So maybe I would look for that to happen again for like the 10th straight time and get denied there. Otherwise, is there any implications for the 49ers as far as how you're looking at the NFC or anything else?
I mean, there is like no implications because the NFC is just that bad, right? Like the 49ers actually could have a little bit of a drop off at defense, a little bit of a drop off in offensive production with this quarterback, carousel. And I don't know, they could maybe get the bye week if the NFC West or NFC East is a little, if the Eagles only win 12 games, they could get the bye, really, because the 49ers are going to get 2 free wins against Arizona. The Rams will probably be pretty bad. Like their path to winning 12, 13 games is pretty clear, which is wild.
Okay, well, let's talk AFC for a little bit here. The Bills they kind of did the all-in thing last season, bringing in Von Miller, having a bunch of contracts structured in a way with low cap hits last season. They restructured now to free up more cap. Now they're bringing in Leonard Floyd as another guy. So they're kind of trying to go a little bit all-in-ish again this season. And they were probably, at least according to my modeling, from week 1 through maybe week 11 or 12 of last season, they would have been like my number 1 team in the NFL, falling off at the end of the year to the Chiefs. But I think they're kind of viewed as a distant second to the Chiefs, maybe even being below the Bengals in some people's minds. I kind of wonder whether the Bills are a little bit underrated coming into this season.
Well, Diggs is another year older. Gabe Davis, whatever promise we thought Gabe Davis had, seems like it's not there.
He sucks, but whatever. It's fine. He can run down the field.
Could have been the ankle, right? If you wanted to be charitable, you could say maybe it was this ankle injury he was dealing with.
He's just one of those players where you're like rolling a 20-sided die or something like that to figure out if he's going to have a monster game, and maybe you get that twice in 10 rolls, and then you feel pretty good about it. But maybe you get it 0 times. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they have the same fundamental problem, which is Josh Allen is like 90% of an elite quarterback, but then like loses his mind a couple times. The Sam Darnold thing.
Who's better, Allen or Burrow?
Allen. Burrow has the most unfixable problem of an elite quarterback. Which
then do you put anyone between Allen and Mahomes?
I think I would rather have Jalen Hurts. I think.
Whoa, really interesting. I don't know about that. I'm okay. What I was going to make 2 points. Number one, like, what's the implication of the fact that I think Patrick Mahomes is as close to being properly valued relative to the other quarterbacks in the NFL?
This is the most
than we've seen.
Yes.
That we've seen since 2019, I guess, since his MVP year. But even then, it was only 1 season, so people didn't appreciate it enough. But then 2019, we had Lamar MVP, even though he won the Super Bowl. It was this. 2020, we had this whole discussion like Russell Wilson was as good. You remember that? Russell Wilson was like
the one I remember.
And then Josh Allen was better last offseason, according to people, and I was losing my mind. So as someone who's been a Mahomes stan, someone who's been Mahomes is perpetually underrated. This is the first offseason where I've been like, he's still probably underrated, but this is the closest we've seen to properly rated for him.
I agree. I think this is the closest the market and the community, the football watching community has ever been at understanding that he's in a tier by himself and that there's no reason to argue against that. I'm also prepared to be wrong about Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen just like lays nuclear waste to the NFL for a year, and saying that I might take Jalen Hurts over him as Jalen Hurts like throws 4 interceptions against the 49ers in the NFC Conference Championship game. Like I think I would be basic enough to accept that.
It's just Hurts has got so much around him. I mean, not that other teams don't, but it's a pretty sweet setup.
It is, but what I think the thing with Hurts is, so he's got the Lamar thing where he can just turn any play into like a 13-yard first down run. But
Lamar has more of that thing though.
So yes, Lamar is a much better open field rusher.
Yeah, but Hurts, more explosive player.
Hurts is he's got to be the best short yardage player since Cam Newton, right? I mean, I
mean, I'd agree with that. I'd also say that might be a more like replaceable type of skill set. Not that any quarterback can do it,
but not while also being MVP caliber thrower. I'm
just saying I could find guys who stink throwing the ball who could do what Jalen Hurts could do. I can't find guys who even stink throwing the ball that can do what Lamar Jackson can do.
Sure. Yes. I mean, I maybe that's the most fascinating storyline at quarterback, which is that we've all sort of just like collectively moved on from Lamar Jackson, elite quarterback, when like if he just was healthy for 17 games this year, the Ravens might win the AFC outright. They might have a home, we might have an AFC conference championship not played in Arrowhead for the first time in 6 years. Like,
yeah. I mean, I do think that's interesting.
The Monken hire is, I think, actually weirdly, you might say, okay, well, they hired Greg Roman to do this Lamar-centric offense, but I think you could maybe even say hiring kind of an air raid, pass first, high completion percentage guy like Monken is actually showing even more faith in Lamar by saying, we actually think Lamar is a better passer than everyone does. And we're going to, although the Odell Beckham thing, I cannot believe he's going to be playing for them.
I'm ambivalent on the Monken thing because I love Monken like independent of Lamar. But my default when it comes to running quarterbacks, when they say they want to run less, I say don't do that. Like that's probably bad. That's probably not.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. This Josh Allen thing over the offseason about him. I don't take that away from him, right? Like he needs that. He needs that weapon. He
can't help himself. He can't help. Himself. Josh
I want it on the record. He can't. But I think the same thing is true.
He'll be hurdling dudes on week 3. Okay.
Yeah. The same thing is true of Hurts as well, though. Like, if you take that weapon away from him, he becomes like Ryan Tannehill. Like, I don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me give you one more Chiefs thing. And I think I'm a little bit, you mentioned, okay, Stephon Diggs is getting a little bit older.
There's another guy who's getting a little bit older.
What the hell are the Chiefs going to do if Travis Kelce decides he's not going to be robo tight end and just not only not age, never get injured in a position where traditionally the injury rates are higher, right, than even at wide receiver. I mean, I realize I always think like this year-over-year thing, even it happens a lot of times week over week, where I remember last year the Bengals had all these injuries on the offensive line and they protected Burrow well against the Bills, and then the next week against the Chiefs, the story was it doesn't matter. It's like it doesn't matter.
Even try in that game. That was what that Bills game, one of the most embarrassing losses I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was bad. But my point is that the next week I saw people commentate and say like, "Oh, I'm not worried about the injuries anymore because of last week." And it's like, no, we should still have a pretty like strong assumption that having backups matters beyond one game. I think for the Chiefs thing, I'm starting to wonder whether or not we said, okay, he lost Tyreek Hill, perhaps honestly like the best player non-quarterback in the NFL. I think there's an argument to be made. He's the most valuable non-quarterback in the NFL. And Patrick Mahomes had a better season than he did the year before. So therefore, it doesn't matter. We'll have Sky Moore out there and Kadarius Toney, who had 170 receiving yards in the regular season last year, and MVS out there running, and everything's going to work out. Where maybe we're placing a little too much faith. Like, shouldn't we be somewhere in between? Shouldn't we say, yeah, we're not as worried as we were before we knew what would happen without Tyreek Hill, but we shouldn't just say it doesn't matter when you're just piecing things together at wide receiver.
I mean, it matters, but Mahomes is going to do what he
What if
needs to
Travis
do.
Kelce gets injured?
Noah Gray, 8 for 80 and 2 against the Bengals in the AFC Conference Championship game. Because I doubted them last year. I did.
I know, but that's the problem. You don't want to overreact to the doubting not happening, right?
Sure. I guess that is a good point. That's not very
We're somewhere in
analytical
between.
of
If we
me.
thought they were going to be bad, this good, let's say this is good, this is bad. We thought they're going to be here's with Tyreek Hill. We thought they were going to go here. They actually went here. Well, maybe they're more like this, maybe, but they're not going to be here again. I would say that's tough to replicate. It kind of is one of those situations where almost everything has to go right. And I do think Juju Smith-Schuster, whatever you say about him, even if he's not making a huge impact with his stats, he's probably more reliable to be a receiver than Tony or Sky Moore or whoever they're gonna have out there.
I mean, that at the end of the day, I think even if Kelce is healthy and is Kelce, they're gonna need one of these guys to step up to some degree. Tony, Sky, Rice, Richie James, Justin Ross, who I don't, whoever. One of them is going to have to be like a difference maker to some degree. I mean, last year it ended up being Valdez-Scantling in the playoffs. He was a real receiver for the first time ever. I don't anticipate him doing that all year long, but who knows? I mean, Eric seemed a little bit leaving the door open for Sky or leaving the light on for him. That, Andy doesn't really historically use rookie wide receivers. The Hardman thing was kind of an anomaly because they drafted him thinking Tyreek was going to be suspended. Then Tyreek wasn't suspended. Then Tyreek got hurt. So it was just kind of one of those things.
Yeah. I guess I'm just a little.
I'm bearish on Sky. I don't think it's going to happen. Although he did score a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Okay, you have any thoughts? I guess the Jets. What the hell is going on?
They're going to stink.
Are they going to stink? Okay, that's
they're not going to stink. They're going to play good defense and they're going to run the ball. But I think there's this Jets fan fantasy of Aaron Rodgers, being Joe Namath basically, and being this superstar and throwing for 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns. And I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I feel like he's one of these guys where you never know can have that sort of season. Although
we wrote him off not even that long ago.
Yeah, I mean my bullshit radar gag reflex whatever was going on. We know when Diana Rossini was visiting Jets camp and all those tweets she was sending out about Aaron Rodgers is holding people responsible, and so I was like, okay, yeah, we get it. He's Aaron Rodgers, he's doing something, but I don't believe it that much. Okay, Chargers. Tell me about Chargers. Could Chargers potentially be undervalued here? They have longer odds to win the AFC. Of course, a lot of it is about the division than the Jags right now. I don't know. Everyone was loving them last season, and there's no real difference other than J.C. Jackson stinks.
They got Kellen Moore now, buddy.
Well, I guess Kellen Moore stinks, according to the Dak apologists. So
Kellen Moore does not stink. Kellen Moore is, I think, gonna reinvigorate that team. I think they built the entire offense out of checkdowns to Austin Eckler, and I think they're gonna get some vertical passing offense. They got Quentin Johnston in there now. I actually think last year was the year to be off the Chargers. Although, just from a vibes perspective, all-time bad vibes in that playoff loss to the Jaguars. I mean, truly, how do you let that happen? I mean, if you're Justin Herbert, how do you let that happen, dude? It's bad.
I mean, shit happens.
No, I see. You can't be that analytical about sports. You can't be so analytical about sports that you allow yourself to cough up a 20-point lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars in a playoff game.
Yeah. I have to go back.
Look
to see what what happens to that.
Are you so analytic based that after Matt Ryan and Kyle Shanahan coughed up the Super Bowl to the Patriots, you're you roll the dice enough times, you're going to get that outcome?
No, I'm not necessarily on that one, but there was a clear. I mean, whatever. We don't need to relitigate this whole thing here, but Shanahan the not running the ball there when all they had to do was just chip shot a field goal and win the game was pretty bad because they almost got.
Sure.
They had the ability to stop the worst possible run right there.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it. So I'm trying to think of what the chart. I mean, I guess Staley turtled, right? Did he turtle? What happened last season? When I can't even think back to what happened during that game.
Honest to God, I went to bed. They were. I went to bed at halftime.
There were definitely some deleted tweets of people celebrating the fact that they were gonna win that game. Let me see what happened here, because I remember. So touchdown, field goal, missed field goal. So that's no good. How long was the missed field goal? 40-yard missed field goal. So that's no good. They actually got a field goal. They just didn't have the ball at all, basically. They only had possession 4 times, and they got 2 field goal attempts.
They gave up a quick score at the end of the first half, which you never want to do in that spot. And they immediately gave up the touchdown in the third quarter. Then they kicked a field goal. Then the Jaguars got a fast touchdown. Then they got another one. But probably the most damning thing is that they did not score a point in the fourth quarter. That's got to be the most damning thing.
Yeah. So they had this field goal, 4th and 3 at the 22. So that's, I don't know, man. That's probably a go for it, but it's not a gimme. And then 4th and 5 on their own 30 with 3:21 left, up by 2. That's probably also a go for situation. So they had a couple of those types of deals. Anyway, Jags got to be a little overvalued right now, right? People love the Jags.
Yeah, they are, and they're very overvalued in the fantasy football markets too. Like they're all going crazy early.
Really? Like Ridley? Are people on Ridley?
Ridley is like the wide receiver 16. ETN's like the running back 12. Kirk is the wide receiver 27. Then Trevor Lawrence is like a 6th, 7th round pick, going like right after Herbert. Ingram is the tight end 8. Even Zay Jones is like a 10th rounder.
Yeah, it's interesting with Lawrence because I'm not as willing to just completely write off his struggles during his rookie year and just say, it was all.
Yeah, I am absolutely.
Well, but listen to my argument here. So number one, he wasn't quite as good in his junior season coming out of Clemson. Like he kind of peaked almost before he got to that point. He last season, even midway through the season, it was a little rough. Like he threw multiple interceptions within the 10-yard line. He was throwing back-breaking type of picks. And then he came through at the end of the season. He did well. I'm just saying that he showed, more struggles, I think, last year than some people want to remember because he had this really good end of the season and obviously that comeback victory in the playoffs.
Yeah, you're not gonna get me on this one. I think Trevor Lawrence is not as good as we thought he was going to be, right? When he was the shoe-in number 1 overall pick. Sort of lucky in where people maintain that Andrew Luck was this Hall of Fame unbelievable quarterback for the entirety of his time in the NFL when he never really put results like that on the field, but he was still pretty good. I think
his teams were shit, but
his teams were really bad.
Yeah.
I think Lawrence is not there yet. I would certainly not put him in the discussions with Burrow or Allen or Hurts or Lamar or Mahomes or any of those guys yet. But I would not be surprised for him to enter that conversation at some point.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I just know that he had some bonehead. It reminds me a little bit of Josh Allen's 2021, where Allen had a lot of struggles, but then had a really hot end of the season, and then people just forgot about it, and all of a sudden he was better than Mahomes. Well, who are you finding let's talk about best ball for a second. So who are you finding yourself being high on or low on so far?
Well, we can actually
you got a spreadsheet up here.
Well, I can just look at my exposures on Underdog. Let's see here. Okay, if you had to guess, let's just take a guess off the top of your head. My most drafted player. This guy goes really late, and he's after the 150th pick.
I have no idea. I don't know. Who would be your most drafted player?
I tweet about this guy a lot.
Man, I've been really off of Twitter recently. Fuck. I don't know. I have no clue.
It's Taysom Hill because he is eligible. He's
eligible.
You
did Taysom Hill last year too.
Yeah, he finished. He was the sixth highest scoring tight end in fantasy football.
I don't even know what that means because there's like
Well, it doesn't.
drop
So that's
off
the
is
thing.
huge. Yeah,
Is it doesn't mean anything, but because
yeah,
it doesn't mean anything, if he just
yeah.
layers, if he gets 2 30-point weeks, which I would say I don't know. I'd make him a favorite to have 1 week over 25 points and like plus 130 to have 2 weeks of over 25 half PPR points.
You're not worried about Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau also being there?
Or Jamal Williams or Kendre Miller or Derek Carr. Taysom has had at least 9 touchdowns by hook or by crook for 4 years straight.
He's like your legitimate in best ball type of player.
Yes.
Where you like to classify all these guys who just kind of suck as being best ball guys. He's like the legitimate.
But at tight end, it works out because if weeks he sucks. I mean, like guess what? Like Kyle Pitts is going to have 10 weeks where he sucks. George Kittle is going to George Kittle is going to have 5 weeks where he doesn't score 5 points in half PPR. It just is what it is. A couple of the other guys I really like. Rashee Rice, he's just so cheap. He's like last year. Sky Moore was.
What about Patrick
Mahomes?
Mahomes is an awful GM though.
Yeah, well, buddy, it's seeming like that is more and more true as we get through the years. Brock Purdy is actually my most drafted quarterback right now. It looks like because he's basically a last round pick, and I'm pretty confident he's going to start for the 49ers. Maybe I should mix in a little bit of Sam Darnold. Honestly, the guys you end up with a lot of are just cheap guys.
Yeah. Well, let's look. What about some guys that would be more of a planting your flag type of situation?
Pollard is definitely the one where he's my second most drafted running back, and he's a second round pick. So that means I'm taking him ahead of ADP a lot. And
that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I don't know how much I buy like the injury concerns or not, but I think it makes sense if you look at the usage without Zeke, right? Yeah.
I mean, the Cowboys had I forget it's like 560 total running back touches last year. So even if you were like, oh yeah, they want to spell him, they don't want to give him Derrick Henry workload or whatever. It's like, well,
you know what?
He's still going to set a career high in touches.
What I was looking at is I was doing offensive player of the year market, looking through that. And I thought, speaking of ETR here, I thought they made a good case for Nick Chubb. But then when I was looking through all of the running backs and like who are in these types of situations, and I was like, I kind of like Tony Pollard almost just as much as Nick Chubb on a lot of this stuff. I'm more confident that he can actually catch the ball too.
Yeah, what number can you get on him?
I don't know. I got to look it up. But I'm just saying that it was just one of those situations where looking at like who can get that workload, like who can legitimately get the workload. And it was basically who can lead the NFL in scrimmage yards. That's what I'm looking at.
Pollard can do both. Pollard can, I think the reason why I'm so jacked on Pollard is I think he can have an Eckler season where he has, let's call it 1,900 scrimmage yards, but like 22 touchdowns. Like I think Pollard could score like an unbelievable amount of touchdowns in this offense. Cause you give him, let's give him 5 Pollard touchdowns. So like, just out of nowhere, 40 plus yard touchdowns or whatever, but then give him a bunch of the red zone work too. Cause like what is Malik Davis, is Deuce Vaughn, is Ronald Jones taking the goal line work? I guess the big issue, and people pointed this out to me, which is that Zeke is just freaking re-signing with the Cowboys, right? Like he's gonna take the veteran minimum and re-sign.
I guess that's a possibility. It looks like Pollard you can get as high as 60 to 1, most places around 45, 50 to 1. And then now we've seen, well, where is Chubb going on here? Chubb is 35 to 1 is the best you can even get on him. So he's moved up a bit. So yeah, so I was looking at Pollard as being like an alternative when Chubb has already moved a bit from when those ETR guys were touting him. I'm just not sure that Chubb can get over the hump on the scrimmage yards without just getting like 2,000 rushing yards like Derrick Henry.
Yeah, it is. It's all round numbers based. I mean, that's how you get.
Oh yeah, I was looking at it. I was like, you have to lead the league in scrimmage yards. Okay, if you get 2,000 rushing yards, you get it, right? You have to lead the league in scrimmage yards. But there's a huge bias now towards wide receivers, but this is being reflected in the odds where wide receivers never won the award. Like Jerry Rice won it twice. And other than that, no one won the award until Michael Thomas in 2019. But now it's been 3 out of the last 4 years because we have no good method of judging these guys. So we just say, oh, how many yards did he get versus historical, whatever. And they're just is much more likely to get a top 5 all-time season in receiving now than a top 5 all-time season in rushing.
Yeah.
Or scrimmage yards.
Yeah, no, that's true. I wonder if there's anyone there, a wide receiver, who I think maybe it, you'd have to really reach for this one, but Garrett Wilson, if you think he's as good as Devontae Adams is and Rodgers likes him, like if he's willing to like watch like loose change with Aaron Rodgers, and then they become best buds, you could see like a completely new, because they have no one else talented, right? They got rid of the only other talented wide receiver they have. So it's Garrett Wilson and a bunch of
it's interesting because I actually wrote up in my piece as the Chris Olave was like arbitrage on Garrett Wilson, because I think they're basically the same type. I think there's same type of talent between the two. Garrett Wilson is 25-1 and Chris Olave is like, you can get him like 60-1 type of thing. And I don't know, Derek Carr is willing to spam someone with targets. At least he did last year for Devontae Adams. It's just the catch rate was god awful. So I don't know. Rodgers also, when in this success comeback that he's had, he's never been high volume. I mean, he's thrown it a ton to Devontae Adams, but they never hit a high volume. And if they really have a good defense, I don't know if they're going to hit a high volume this year. So yeah, I'm with you on Wilson, but I just think was there any difference between him and Olave other than he's attached to Aaron Rodgers, I guess would be the thing.
I mean, Wilson put up his numbers with like
they also threw the ball a billion times, though.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember who was it, Scott Barrett or someone put out a tweet about like how many yards they had passing when it wasn't Zach Wilson. I'm like, yeah, Joe Flacco dropped back to pass like 65 times
like a
game.
Billion times.
You're gonna get that's not gonna happen with Aaron. If it does, something has gone wrong. Something has gone very, very wrong for the Jets if that ends up happening. All right, so who else are you looking at? Maybe are there any guys that you're fading here?
Oh, that's a good question. There are definitely a couple guys I'm fading. Let's just go through the top. I definitely am not taking a ton of Breece Hall right now. Speaking of the New York Jets, just because,
yeah,
I could totally end up eating that because I could see Breece Hall going like completely nuclear, getting playing this Aaron Jones role or whatever. Yeah. But it's just a hard sell on a guy who my guess is he's not ready week 1, and maybe that ends up not mattering, or maybe it does. Ridley, honestly, I don't really like taking. I think he's pretty overpriced based on the situation that he's in. Like I like the 3 guys who go after him, Debo, Amari, and Hopkins, actually, now that I think Hopkins might end up being a Chief a little bit. Oh, Najee Harris, easiest fade of all time. I mean, he's a running back 13.
Is he can he possibly overall get cheap enough? Is there any level at which he becomes cheap enough? Because I think we're going to hit that territory.
Sure. If I would take Najee. I would take Najee Harris over Miles Sanders, who goes 60th overall. I would take Najee Harris there. Okay. Who else am I fading? I'm not taking a ton of Mike Evans. I like Godwin better there. I think Godwin is the better fit for their shitty quarterback play. DeAndre Swift, he's got to fall like 10 or 15 spots after ADP for me to take him. DeAndre Swift is the 5th highest paid Eagles running back. That's some good trivia for you. It does not matter to them one way or the other, right? If Swift is good, great, they'll use him. If he comes in and the coaches hate the same things about him that the Lions coaches hated, guess what? Healthy scratch, Trey Sermon's active and playing special teams. They do not care. I guarantee you.
Yeah, or they'll just use him in a very limited role. Yeah, no, it was mostly that trade was mostly for Howie Roseman lore. To give him even an extra bump after that draft. That people, Howie's done it again. He's willing to give up more than any other team in the NFL. Okay, like the other teams could do this too. You realize?
Well, it's just because everyone knows the name DeAndre Swift, right? Like he's kind of like a popular player, so you add him in there.
I mean, I do like the Swift guys. I feel like he's probably undervalued by the NFL because he doesn't feel like the right type of player. I remember watching that Hard Knocks where Deuce Staley was like, I'm going to get this kid to do it. I'm going to get him. And I knew there was no chance that was going to work. Like he's just not the type of player where you dress him down and yell at him and he's going to start like being more aggressive. It's more like you have to be just content with who he is. He's not going to run through every tackle basically.
Yes, I think you're right, which is that NFL coaches get in a room with DeAndre Swift and they're like, you need to man up. And then the nerds in the front office are like, will you just
leave him alone, our poor child. Oh yeah, we come in and just stroke his head and it's like, it's okay. Right. Just keep averaging yards per target. That was good. You did a great job there. Yeah.
Okay. Gabe Davis, have like none of him. If you draft Josh Allen, fine. Oh, Dalton Kincaid. What do you haven't looked at anything, right? Where do you think Dalton Kincaid is being drafted?
I mean, I don't even know. I mean, there's no good tight end. So like tight end 10 or something.
Damn. Pretty good. Tight end 11, 123rd overall. But
yeah, I don't get this whole thing of, guess what? He's just going to be a slot receiver. I believe it when I see it. That's like one of those believe it when I see it type of things. Rookie tight end comes in and they just use him like a receiver. I don't know. I didn't get that pick. I didn't get that pick from the Bills' perspective. Like, I wanted them to draft like Jalen Hyatt or someone who could just run down the field and Josh Allen could throw bombs up to him. Like, do you need a tight end? I think Kincaid's awesome. I mean, he looks great. I just would never have been the draft the first one. There are like 5 different tight ends who could pop in that class.
I was gonna say I kind of like Laporta more.
Oh yeah, I definitely like Laporta more, but I know that it's just roll of the dice essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I am kind of fading, unconsciously fading Josh Allen because I prefer taking Mahomes and then backfilling him with Sky and Richie James and Rashee Rice and Jerick McKinnon and those guys, as opposed to having to take. Oh, I guess you can kind of backdoor Josh Allen because you can take Khalil Shakir and Deontay Hardy, but I just like Mahomes, and Mahomes has a really good Week 17 game. There, he's going to play against the Bengals.
Where's Dawson Knox going now?
Oh, he's like free. He's like tight end 20.
Yeah,
he's like completely
free. They paid him a shit ton of money for a tight end. Anyway.
And there's no out in his contract either until after next season. Like he's going to play. Yeah.
I think Allen, the risk would be he doesn't run, but I don't know. He's too much YOLO. He's got that YOLO streak.
Yeah, I just prefer the structural benefit of like you can take Mahomes and then take 4 of his pass catchers. Like it's pretty nice to be able to do that. Let's see here. Who else am I taking real stances on? So we were talking about the Cowboys. Jake Ferguson, pretty sure he's going to be the starting tight end for the Cowboys. Luke Schoonmaker is like already injured, and he was also like the 7th tight end drafted in this class. So, which was weird. And all the rumors were that they wanted Michael Mayer or Kincaid, and then obviously ended up getting a little bit priced out there. So I think Jake Ferguson is just, why can't he just be Dalton Schultz? If
anything, there. Like, you don't like to necessarily apply like a scheme from say, oh, this tight end had this target share, so therefore you plug someone else in because it matters more like who the player is. But the way they use Dalton Schultz, kind of like a lot of guys could do that, right? Like a lot of tight ends could go in there and do that. It's like the one blow up year that like Austin Hooper had when he was
Jacob Tamme. How about Jacob Tamme? You got to go back a long way for that one.
Yeah, it's like these blow up years where these guys are just, they're just 5 yards.
It's because blowing up a tight end is so relative. It's like if Jake Ferguson catches 55 passes for 487 yards and 5 touchdowns, that's like it's a win you couldn't even fathom. It's a win beyond a win. I was drafting a lot of Elijah Moore when all these contests opened, and then people kind of talked me off the ledge there. But what's happening is that the fantasy markets are smarter than they've ever been and are really drafting a lot of wide receivers early, and these crappy running backs in years past, like Isaiah Pacheco would have been like a 3rd round pick in 2018 or whatever, and now he's a 7th round pick. So all these wide receivers are getting pushed up. I can at least tell myself a semblance of upside on Elijah Moore. Like, he was so good as a rookie in a horrible situation. Like, why can't he be good in Cleveland, but no one seems to agree with me. I've not gotten one like I haven't gone on a show with anyone where they've been like, yeah, totally, dude.
I mean, it's possible. I guess I would say when it comes to Elijah Moore, maybe Calvin Ridley, maybe still Kadarius Toney. I don't know how high people are on him.
He is so high. I only take him when I've already selected Mahomes or Burrow.
I'd say for all those guys, what I would do is if you want to like ground yourself in your expectations, because this is where I think people get way off, is like, look how much the teams had to give up to trade for them. Okay. In the case of Elijah Moore, not a whole lot. Okay. So like that should be more of your grounding for what your expectation is for them to go forward, not like Elijah Moore in a vacuum being a great potential player. Like he wasn't that much. Ridley, they gave up, I guess it's a conditional, what could end up being a second round pick if he hits like all these different conditions. So, an okay amount, but nowhere close to like an elite wide receiver type of amount that would come through. And the Kadarius Toney, again, we're talking about like a third round pick they gave up for him. Not the most there. So I would use those as kind of like if the Browns get more out of him than a second for third round pick swap and a cheap salary, they'll be happy. So that's not necessarily fantasy relevant, even if he potentially has some upside.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it is a matter, but the market kind of does that for you though, too. Like the market balances out the expectations for you, and you have to decide if you either are or are not in line with market consensus.
But I think I don't know if the markets appreciate that. I think sometimes they just look at the name and they think, Elijah Moore had a horrible situation last year. We still like him. He was a second round pick. It's like, he's not a second round pick anymore. He's a fourth for third pick swap that now, and I don't know if people appreciate that when players move at that point in their career.
It depends a little bit on the player, and it depends on their like lore status inside the fantasy community.
He's getting hype. He's getting hype also during this part of the season where,
we'll see if DeAndre Hopkins ends up signing there or not.
I mean, I think as nauseating and disgusting as it is, I think anything attached to Deshaun Watson is probably undervalued at this point, just generally, whether it's the Browns' chances of winning the division or the conference or the Super Bowl, or a lot of these receivers. They barely threw the ball last year, even with Watson, partially due to, I think, just the fact that he was getting up to speed, and partially due to the fact that they had these ridiculous weather games a couple of times where they could barely throw the ball.
Yeah, I mean, that was good for Schadenfreude on the Deshaun Watson thing that he looked like such shit, but it was probably such a small and weird sample that we can't have any good Schadenfreude long-term takes out.
I mean, he's like, if you're going to objectively look at it, at least I have, and again, it's tough to do with the time off, but of his entire sample for his career versus the sample that we saw here, whatever, look at purely on field sort of thing, you could put him as being, after maybe like the second tier of quarterbacks, as being in the, just as likely to be good as any of those guys. If you're going to say Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, maybe Herbert, and now we're into Hurts, at least for me. I know you have Hurts higher. Now we're into like Hurts, Lawrence, Watson. I put him right there, honestly, for what his expectations are going forward. And I'm not sure people view him nearly as high as that.
They don't. For mostly because no one's seen him play a high level game since he got shithoused against the Kansas City Chiefs in the 2019 playoffs. That's the last time. That's the last good statistical game he had.
Yeah, he's been horrible in the playoffs, which was surprising because I was looking at playoff numbers.
I just can't even draw. Deshaun Watson has never played on a good team since he was in college.
No. I'm not drawing conclusions on it. I'm just saying, like, I was looking at the Lamar Jackson disconnect for perception wise. And I think Jackson was like the worst quarterback who had at least a certain number of dropbacks over the last 5 years in the playoffs as far as his efficiency. But Watson was right there. And I was more trying to explain why people aren't high on Lamar Jackson on other NFL teams. Not that it was correct, but that plays into people's minds when you exit the season with a poor performance.
Yeah, that is. I guess it is kind of interesting that that's not a part of the discourse. I guess because the discourse against Watson is just so poisoned, anyways.
Well, and it's been a while, and he was really good in that 2020 season where they didn't even make the playoffs. So, so he did.
I completely memory hold that. I'd completely forgotten.
Yeah, I mean they're 4-12. And he had a fantastic season, honestly. Like he had his best season of his career by any measure you want to look at. He was Mahomes adjacent. All these guys have been adjacent for a while.
He was Mahomes.
He was the guy. He was like the Josh Allen of last offseason.
For a little while, he was the leader in career adjusted yards per attempt over Mahomes. He's not anymore, but he was for a little while.
Well, he had an insane rookie season from an efficiency standpoint where he like had turnovers, but he had this like absolutely nuts efficiency for a while there. All right, do we got anything to say relevant to basketball talk here with the NBA Finals?
I just really fucking hope the Miami Heat do not win. I just no disrespect to Jimmy Butler, to Eric Spoelstra, who I think is the best coach. I can't even remember the last guy. I don't know in basketball who would be that good of a coach. He's clearly unbelievable.
Well, his predecessor, I guess you could say, like Pat Riley back in the day, it was pretty good.
Yeah, but I have no experience. Like I have no memories of Pat Riley as a coach.
What's interesting about Spoelstra was, he was like a little bitch basically coming in. Like no one had any respect for that guy, and then he won over LeBron in them basically. Yeah.
Well, they went in. LeBron, Bosh, and Wade went into Pat Riley's office.
Said, fire this guy. Yeah.
Get this guy out of here. And Pat Riley said, that's not how we do it here, boys.
Yeah.
Spoelstra is your boss, and kept him on. And he's a badass. But really, I think everyone kind of views it this way. Jokic winning an NBA championship, it'll just be the final. The nerds have won. There's not, the ball knowers, everyone, they all lose, right? The nerds win everything. Finally, it's all over. There's no argument to be had because the nerds have been on Jokic forever. That's his fan base.
Fan base. He's the guy that we would have said even this season should have been the MVP. Where the ball knowers, all over Embiid, who they've Julius Caesared now and just stabbed him and
the ball knowers transitioned to like Joel Embiid like failing memes so fast. It's really
I know that was hilarious. It was like this guy sucks. He can't perform in the playoffs. Blah blah blah. And then we're explaining.
But now the ball knowers have Jimmy Butler. They have Jimmy Butler.
Do the ball knowers, are they really behind the Heat though, or is this like they kind of have to be behind the Heat though?
The ball knowers are behind the Heat because they have Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, who are two ball knower favorites.
But Jimmy Butler wasn't even good in the game 2, right? It's just like
he hasn't been good. He hasn't really been good since he hurt his ankle. He has not led I think it's 10 quarters in a row. He has not led the Miami Heat in scoring. And Tyler Hiero's coming back in game 3.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm trying to think of like who would have been the ball knower team this year.
The Celtics.
Lakers, maybe?
No,
the Celtics? Yeah, I guess that's true.
Because you can say all this stuff about Tatum and Brown. They score in isolation. They score in the mid range, which the ball knowers will say is still important. Key problem though, Jaylen Brown can't fucking dribble, and is still not learned how to dribble.
I was just gonna say, you talk about the ball knowers turning on Embiid. Oh my God, ball knowers are really. Just chill out with Jaylen Brown. He's not my favorite either, but now people are like, this guy's trash and you can't win with him just because they lost in game 7 after Tatum twisted his ankle.
I mean, they should have lost that series anyways, though. Like it was like the Derek White miracle shot. I mean, how unbelievable was that?
Okay. How about this for a take? Is the NBA just kind of bad now?
No, the NBA is awesome, but this is a very common take. This is actually I can tell you've been reading your House of Strauss because this is his big take.
I'm subscribed, but only free, so I just see the headlines because I like to see the headlines.
And his headlines,
I knew that was coming. I'm like, I knew that was coming.
Look, Ethan, if you listen, honestly, you're so fucking good at your job, dude. I am in awe at how good he never misses. Dude never misses.
What do you have? Too bad if people would have if there would have been more talk about like Jim Brown being a woman beater or something like that. He could have jumped in on that one, but I don't think there was quite enough to defend Jim Brown there. But anyway, go ahead. So NBA is bad, but here's what it comes down to. Like, people just love dynasties. As much as people say they love competitive balance, your casual
they don't.
fan loves dynasties.
Everyone loved just knowing they could turn
People
up
are still on the Warriors
in June, and they would have Warriors caps. That's what everyone wanted.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm going by, okay, the biggest bandwagon, like, tangential fan that you're trying to gain are children, right? They're no loyalty at all unless they're forced by their parents to have loyalty to anyone. And I would see in New York City like all these Warriors jerseys. That's what I saw more than anything else, is Warriors jerseys. Like, what are these kids doing now? Are they interested now in Jokic? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is Jokic is not. No one knows who Nikola Jokic is, right?
He needs a reality show with his brothers or something like that. Where
he needs something. Yeah, like my wife definitely knows who LeBron is. She might know Jimmy Butler. I'll say 20% chance she would be able to pick Jimmy Butler out of a lineup. But literally, Nikola Jokic, I mean, I would say that and she'd be like Gesundheit. I mean, she would have no fucking clue, right? Nikola Jokic, there's always been like sports writers have always done like the grandma test, and that's when someone is a superstar. Like, Nikola Jokic might not pass buddies in your fantasy football league test. I mean, honest to God, there'll be people listening to this who are like,
oh, I got a good House of Strauss take here. The NBA is going down because the best player is a white guy, and it's discrimination against white people.
Yeah, that's good.
Like, when was the last time? When was the last time there was a good white player?
Larry Bird.
Well, I guess Dirk.
But
right?
that was at the peak of the NBA.
I guess Dirk qualifies. Dirk is a more equivalent.
Dirk was Nikola Jokic. No one cares. No one cared. The whole.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. So they didn't like Dirk either. Is it a European bias or? But if you're Strauss, you can lean into being a white guy bias. You can't sell him. You can't sell him in today's equity and inclusion and economy, in the BLM economy. You cannot sell Nikola Jokic.
I mean, I think the NBA's big problem is just the resting stuff. Not even that it's a bad idea, but because the tenor of the conversation is every time you hear about the NBA, it's people complaining about how Kawhi Leonard only plays 60 games a year or whatever. That's just it. That's the whole conversation. And also, there's just too much of it, right? Too much.
There's just way too many games.
Way too many games.
Yeah, the series are too long, also, but they've actually come through this year, bringing out some of the longer series. Okay, could Luka break through? He's got a little bit more charisma.
He's more charismatic, more personal. I mean, not that Jokic is not charismatic and not funny. He just doesn't care to do it. Like, Luka, I think, likes at least being popular and famous and rich. The issue I fear with Luka Doncic is that he is not going to try hard enough on the basketball court to ever have his teams be successful enough. I'm worried that he will never get his body into good enough shape and play enough on defense for his teams to be as successful as they could be.
That would be great, because then we could have the scouts who were low on him in the draft could come back and say they were right, because like Pudgy Luka was definitely a story.
He's still pudgy. He's like Luka Doncic and I have the same like paunch. It's not ideal.
These guys like victory lap way after the fact, when they were still ultimately far off and wrong, but the player doesn't reach the heights that they could have at one point, and they're like, see, we were right the whole time. There was something.
Well, I mean, that's basically the Hawks front office is going to do that, because they've been to more conference finals since that trade than the Mavs have. Yeah,
that's true. I got another one. I don't know if this House of Strauss is may not, but I've been thinking about recently if we're gonna lean into like any sort of like racial takes on things. So if we see everything come through here, everyone's, the number one pick, it's going to be the generational prospects coming in. If he ends up doing what we think, if Wemby ends up doing what we think he can do, you have him, you'll have Mbappe as being the best player in soccer. I think he is right now. And then Patrick Mahomes is not really international, but at least football, the best player, all biracial. Can we get a biracial story here? Biracial dominance
See,
of
that's not the
sports.
direction I thought you were going. I thought you were going black Frenchman, and that sort of because
Yeah.
because Europeans, people don't think this way. People think of Europe as much more liberal, but they're
Oh,
actually
yeah.
way more racist. Europeans are
Oh yeah,
super
yeah, yeah. Oh,
racist.
definitely. Obviously, there's way
Um,
more of a culture, and there's just less integration, even when. But it's like people would be shocked if you look at the percentage of Muslims in these countries in Europe. Like, how many? Like, there's like 1% Muslims in this country. There are like 15% Muslims
yeah.
in France and other places, or immigrants, or the immigrants that they've taken from Africa and other places. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's the direction I thought you were going.
No,
Is like
I'm going
just
biracial domination and post-racial maybe. Should we go post-racial on that
sort
too?
of interesting. I mean,
Mahomes is kind of leaning into not being post-racial, which is funny because he's married to the whitest woman on the planet.
oh,
Um,
buddy.
and his daughter's got like blonde hair. Yeah, that would be my thing. Can we get back to post-racialism with the biracial takeover of sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting specifically because I'm thinking about Mbappe. You know, there's this big controversy in soccer right now. Vinicius Jr., great player, had a great
Yeah.
World Cup, probably the best player now on Real Madrid. And there's this big
He's top
racist.
5. I would put, he might be 2. I mean, he's that good. Yeah.
He's phenomenal, but there's this racist controversy in La Liga with him where like
Right.
basically he's like, I don't want to play anymore. Like I don't want to play in this league anymore because everyone's so racist to me. But to my
Yeah.
knowledge, there really has not been much of that with Mbappe. Either at PSG games, away games. Maybe it's just because France has way more black players than Spain does. It could be
Maybe.
that.
And
I don't know.
I think he's, all the stuff is intertwined, right? Like he's basically middle class, right? Again, when we're talking about Patrick Mahomes, it's like he's basically a middle class kid, upper middle class type of kid. He's from Paris. He was born in Paris.
Yeah.
Vinny is obviously not even from the country. And I think there's more of a racialized dynamic amongst Spanish speakers because
Spain is more, from what I understand from reading about this story, Spain is just really racist, even relative to European standards.
yeah, there's always been more of an element, I think, because of the tie-in between Spain and slavery when it came to different places in the Americas and other things, and then black players coming over from South America to play in Spain has happened a lot more often, like superstar level players, where I don't think that's happened really in the French league, in the French league as nearly as much. So I think that's part of it. Also, is it just a lot more constrained?
Because he's French, right? He's one of their own, so it's different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they just
plays...
they haven't brought in players like from Brazil and other places as much. As much as we've seen in Spain has been much more of a destination there.
Yeah,
whether it was
sort of interesting. And I don't know enough about Wembanyama at all to know anything about his background or if there's been racist stuff with his minor league. I guess it's not minor league, it's major league French basketball, but I don't know how many people are at these games. Sort of interesting though. It is interesting in general that so many Europeans are so successful in the NBA right now, that so many, I mean, Joel Embiid is Cameroonian, Nikola Jokic is Serbian, Wembanyama is French, Doncic is Slovakian. It is sort of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have as many sport kind of outlets, I don't think. There's soccer, and then you're too tall, and then you play basketball. And you don't have to play basketball is like, you don't have to be someone who started playing basketball when you're 5 years old. In fact, it may be bad for your development when you're shooting form and everything else you have to like recorrect I mean, even Steph Curry had to like totally redo his shot at a certain point, I think when he was in college, because it's like you're so used to just heaving it up because you don't have the power to end up.
You have the power. Yeah, your body changes. I mean,
yeah.
Embiid came to basketball kind of late, right?
Oh yeah, totally late. I mean, I think
he was like a teenager when he
was
did.
it? I don't know if it was Olajuwon or someone else came to basketball very late too.
Yeah, because they do these. I saw this article the other day. They do these camps, like NBA international or whatever, and that's that's how Embiid started playing basketball. But there's also this other thing of like, so there's this great lineage of like African big men, of like centers and power forwards. But now there's this kid who's in the draft this year who's a guard, right? And he's talking about like, all this basketball stuff in Africa. They want the next Hakeem. They want the next Joel Embiid. They want the next African big man. But like, what about me? I'm like 6'4". I want to be a guard. I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, basically saying like this continent only exists to produce centers. It is funny how stuff gets so stereotyped like that.
It's not. Well, I mean, for the NBA though, it's like if you're just going to blindly scout, you can say, who am I going to scout? The thousands of 6'2" guys or the 3 guys who are 7 feet tall, At one point in time in the NBA, it was something like 1 out of every 10 7-foot people in the world was playing in the NBA just because. But now you need to be now because of defensive switching and other stuff, those guys have gotten like dinosaured out of the game. But it was a very different thing at that point. I think it's funny, like all the white players who come over from Europe, where that's basically all of the NBA white players and has been for a while, but it definitely has not translated. I don't think fans see them at all like they would see an American white player who is a superstar.
I don't know. Isn't Luka basically just like, I don't know. Dude, I don't even think of him as like a Slovakian guy, really.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. He might be the closest. He's got the look, the less European look, at least when it comes to someone like.
And also sure. talking about being racially insensitive, he is Slovenian, not Slovakian, which is a big difference. So my apologies too. See, I want him to be Slovakian because that's where my ancestors are from. So that would have been my talking point if we ever met him. But Luke and I are blood enemies, unfortunately, because he's Slovenian.
Okay, do you got a good NBA Finals take going forward? Well, are we just going to see? Are we going to see the Nuggets just win out here, and the Heat will finally start? The
Heat got their hot 3-point shooting and their one game to confuse Jokic. They got their one game where he only had 4 assists and he felt a little bit pressed on offense, and Jamal Murray almost won it at the buzzer anyway. The Nuggets are just a better team. The Nuggets are better.
How about just like this whole ball go in, 3-pointers go in, you win? Like, what does that do for like the narratives around these things though? Does it exacerbate these sorts of things where we build all these narratives around the Heat?
Humans can find a narrative out of anything, right? It's just all about the number sequencing. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's happening though. You'll find it like, Brian Windhorst will find a way to put a spin on the series. Like Windhorst, he does these. Zach Lowe, I think, is the best at not falling into these narratives. And it's always funny.
Well, he's not on TV as much, probably for that reason. But yeah,
right. But it is always funny to me when he gets one of these narrative guys on the low post, and they're like, and they just try and attribute a game all to like the thing Windhorst was doing is, they turned Jokic into a scorer, and and then Zach was like, he scored 47 points on 67% true shooting. So I wouldn't necessarily say that it was bad, classic and NBA discussion, which like I love. Like everything Zach Lowe says, I'm like, that's gospel.
Oh yeah, no, I love. He's the best. And I remember a few years ago, there was actually like a discourse about Steph Curry maybe not even being like a top 5 player in the NBA anymore, sort of thing. And he was very much like, I see him as being LeBron adjacent, basically, versus other people are trying to bury him. And I was like, yes, preach. How do you think he became so popular? Because my threshold is if you have even more than like 100 and something thousand followers, you can't really be a good analyst. Unless you're doing something like a good fantasy football analyst, maybe you could still qualify. You can't be a good sports analyst, but he's got like 1 million followers, and I feel like he does a good job. Like, how did that happen?
It's a good question. I really don't know. I actually think it's because everyone who analyzes basketball seriously either got started reading or listening to him or just respects him. There's no one's coming for Zach Lowe's throat. Right.
Yeah. Like I feel like if Zach Lowe was born into this media environment today, I don't think he could build up.
He'd be not. It was also like right skill set, right time. Like he had the good platform right as basketball was transitioning, because basketball is the social media sport, right? Like
Yeah.
so much of the basketball content is on Twitter.
It was a
about
great era for
transactions.
basketball too. The LeBron into the Warriors
Yes,
era
totally.
was a fantastic. I mean, that was like
But
the NFL's dead era.
your buddy, Mr. Strauss actually did an article about like, or maybe it was a podcast about how Zach Lowe like actually sways the conversation. Like if Zach Lowe goes on his podcast and talks like, oh, Walker Kessler should be getting rookie of the year votes or defensive player of the year votes or whatever, like that'll happen. People will do it because Zach Lowe said it on his podcast. Like what he has to say like influences what guys get and like contracts and stuff. Like he's that powerful, you know, because
that could be true, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, honestly.
Yeah,
I'll take Zach Lowe's opinion.
I don't think it is either. I think he is the ball knower. I think Zach Lowe is the ball knower.
House of Strauss. I just had to bring it up here because you're talking about it so much. Oh my God, this is so good. The most recent article he had, this is what, because he had some podcasts, and the most recent article was about, I don't even know what the hell happened. I guess it was some A's announcer who like accidentally said the N-word and then he got fired or something like that. And I'm like, sorry, that's kind of like a gots to go situation. I'm sorry, you know, like, maybe, I get it. I get it. So there's some principled stance you could have or whatever, but like talk about replacement, you just replace them. Who gives a fuck? You know, like it's like the punter. He was in the punter thing too. Remember in the Matt Ariza thing or whatever, the Bills punter was charged. And at that point in time, I was like, I don't give a fuck about guilt or innocence or this and that. Like, he's a fucking punter. You took in the mid rounds, like you cut him and you move on. Like people are acting like they were wrong to do that. You don't talk about it for a year for him to eventually be exonerated, partially exonerated, and think that meant that you were wrong to get rid of him in the first place. So that would be my beef with House of Strauss. But I don't know. I got to leverage some of that for myself here going forward.
Yeah,
all right,
dude.
Man.
We've hacked this. I don't know. We're like nothing is standing.
I can't do it though. I can't do it. I know so many good strategies.
Nothing is standing in between either one of us and having like the most popular or top 5 most popular sports Substack, but we're both too fucking cowardly to do it because like we don't want to read mean emails of like people who think we're being insensitive, basically.
Yeah, it's, I mean,
well, and also I don't believe any of this shit. Like I also don't think Ethan does either to some degree. I would love to have him on my show and be like, Ethan, how much of this shit is like really what your thoughts are? You know, because I'm so curious.
Yeah. I mean, like I get it. You know, I get if he said it on accident. You know, he apologized for it immediately. Can we have a culture where everyone doesn't be let go and blah, blah, blah. But at the same point in time, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth dealing with the firestorm after these sorts of things. So anyway, yeah, you're right. We got we'll work on that more. I need like a pseudonym or something so I can still have some self-respect. And before I come out with that. All right, man, you want to plug anything else before we get out of here? I think I've taken up enough of your time today.
Yep. Just make sure you're subscribed to all the podcasts. If you like this, you can subscribe to my Patreon and support more long form style chats like this. I talk with Brian Hooper a lot on that program. He's a good House of Strauss style. I'll say what no one else wants to say style thinker, so people might enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm sure people do enjoy it. There's no doubt. You don't have to agree with it. If you don't agree with it, it's almost more enjoyable, I think for people too. So, well, thanks, man, for joining me, for spending the time. And I'll be talking to everyone next week. I'm trying to think of next week. I don't think I have a guest lineup for next week, but 2 weeks from now, I'm going to have Ben Taylor from Thinking Basketball on here. So that should be a fun conversation. You got
to email Ethan, dude. How have you not emailed Ethan?
Because I can't do it. I can't. I don't know. I'm not a paid subscriber. I know he's had discussions on his podcast where I kind of want to listen to it, where someone's asking him, like, come on, man. Like, do you really? And I kind of want to hear his answer, but I can almost predict what the answer is going to be at the same point in time, that he like sees himself as standing up against the whatever, and that's his value sort of thing is what he's going to say.
But he still follows me on Twitter, so maybe I'll put out a bat signal. And
you're the man for this job. Let's face it, you're the man for this job, and I'll give that to you. All right, man. Thanks for joining me.
Beautiful.